My grandson, Leo, always so eager to help me with technology. He set up my online banking, my supposed lifeline to the modern world. Then, a single text message flashed across my screen, a wrong number that wasn't wrong at all. It was a window into his cruel deception. They saw a quiet old woman, easily confused by their digital world. They forgot the mind that once navigated far more treacherous numbers. Now, it was my turn to make a withdrawal of the truth. These days, life for me, Agnes Pereira, unfolds at a gentler pace. I'm 76 now, a widow for some years, and my small apartment in this quiet city has become my sanctuary. The neighbors see me as the kindly old lady who tends her balcony garden with perhaps a little too much devotion and whose greatest joy is baking for her grandchildren. They tell you I'm a bit lost when it comes to anything more complicated than a television remote, bless their hearts. And in many ways, I've let that be the truth they see, a comfortable cloak of simplicity I've worn for a long time now, finding a certain peace in being underestimated. My grandson, Leonardo, or Leo as we all call him, he's 24 now, bless him, he's always been the one to rescue me from the terrors of modern technology. He's a good boy, or so I've always believed, quick with a smile and ever so patient when his technologically challenged grandmother couldn't figure out how to send an email or why the printer wouldn't print. He'd just laugh, a bright, youthful sound, and say, "Don't worry, Vo, I'll sort it out," and he always did, or so it seemed. His apparent willingness to help was a constant in my later years, a bridge across the digital divide I felt growing wider each day. There was a time, mind you, a lifetime ago it feels, when numbers and graphs were my language, when financial statements were as familiar to me as my own reflection. I navigated a world of investments, of risks and rewards, a world most people, especially my family now, could never imagine me in. I carved out a niche for myself, discreetly, powerfully. But those days are long past. Today, I tell myself, and them, that I prefer the simple perfume of my violets and the quiet hum of my old sewing machine. It's a softer world, or so I've chosen to believe, a deliberate retreat from the sharp edges of my former life. So, when Leo suggested, with his usual earnestness, that I should really get into online banking, it didn't seem entirely out of character for him. He said, "Vo, it would make everything so much easier for you, paying bills, checking your balance, no more queuing at the bank." He painted a picture of such convenience, highlighting how I could manage everything from the comfort of my armchair. And then, of course, he offered to set it all up for me. "It's no trouble at all, Vo, I can do it in a jiffy," he assured me, his eyes wide and sincere, reflecting an image of pure helpfulness. A faint, almost imperceptible shiver of something, was it unease? Danced down my spine for a fleeting moment. I dismissed it almost immediately. Just my old-fashioned reluctance, I chided myself, my timosia de velia, as my late husband Arthur used to lovingly call my stubborn streaks. After all, Leo was family, my grandson, always so helpful, the one who patiently explained social media fads and fixed my television when the picture went fuzzy. What earthly reason would I have to distrust his intentions? So I nodded, a smile I hope looked reassuring on my lips, and said, "Well, if you think it's best, dear, and if it's no bother for you." And so, one afternoon, he sat beside me, first on my old desktop computer, then tapping away proficiently on my smartphone, the one he'd insisted I upgrade to. He set up the accounts, the passwords, the security questions, his fingers flying across the keyboard and screen with the speed that made my own feel ancient and clumsy. He explained things, yes, but in that rapid-fire way young people have, full of jargon I pretended to grasp, his tone just a shade too quick, perhaps a little condescending, as if explaining quantum physics to a toddler. I nodded along, feeling a bit adrift in the sea of new information, but I trusted him. He was Leo, my helpful grandson, making my life simpler. He assured me it was all perfectly safe, more secure even than my old passbook, and that I could call him any time if I got stuck, day or night. He even installed the bank's app on my phone and showed me, very briefly, how to log in, how to see my balance. "There you go, Vo, all set. Now you're in the 21st century." He proclaimed with a triumphant grin, patting my hand. I smiled back, a little overwhelmed by the speed of it all, but mostly grateful. Or so I told myself. Deep down, a tiny, unacknowledged part of my mind, the part that once thrived on meticulous due diligence and cross-referencing every detail, felt a pinprick of something I couldn't quite name, a subtle discord in the melody of his helpfulness. But I pushed it away. He was just trying to help his old grandmother, wasn't he? That was the role he played, and the role I expected. Life with my new online banking settled into a rhythm, or rather, it didn't much change my daily habits. I still preferred the crisp feel of a printed statement from the bank, something tangible I could hold and scrutinize with my reading glasses. It was a habit ingrained from decades of handling important documents. Leo would chuckle whenever I mentioned going to the bank branch. He'd say, "Vo, you really don't need to do that anymore, it's all right here on your phone, see?" But old habits, especially those built on a foundation of financial prudence, die hard. I trusted, but I also liked to verify, even if just for my own peace of mind. It was perhaps a few weeks after Leo's digital makeover of my finances that the first little anomaly appeared. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, the morning sun warming my face, carefully going through my monthly printed bank statement, a ritual I refused to abandon. My finger, tracing the lines of debits and credits, paused. There it was, a small charge, nothing alarming, perhaps 30 or 40 haish, under a rather vague description, Serviço Digital XYZ. I frowned, trying to recall any such service I might have subscribed to. My mind drew a blank. These days, my online activities were mostly limited to reading news sites and watching gardening tutorials. My first instinct was to call Leo. He was my tech guru, after all. When I reached him, his voice was bright and breezy as usual. I explained the charge, my tone probably betraying a hint of my confusion. "Oh, that, Vo," he'd said, a little too quickly, perhaps. "It's probably just one of those new bank fees they sneak in, or maybe you clicked on something by accident and signed up for a trial of some app. These internet things are tricky, always trying to get you to subscribe to something." His explanation was smooth, almost rehearsed, and it didn't quite sit right with the part of me that knew how meticulously banks usually itemize their fees. He then added, with that familiar, slightly condescending patience, "Don't you worry your little head about it, Vo. It's probably nothing. If it appears again, or if it's a bigger amount, you let me know, and I'll take a proper look when I'm over next. But for now, just ignore it. It's too small to be anything serious." His casual dismissal, meant to reassure, had the opposite effect. It wasn't the amount that bothered me, it was the vagueness, the lack of a clear origin. My old financial instincts, dormant for so long, twitched uncomfortably. I knew, from past experience, that small, unexplained discrepancies could sometimes be the first sign of a larger, more complex problem. I thanked him, trying to keep the disquiet from my voice, and hung up. But the little charge, that Serviço Digital XYZ, lingered in my mind. I looked at the statement again. It felt wrong. Arthur, my late husband, always said I had a sixth sense for when something was amiss with numbers, a gut feeling that rarely failed me. He used to joke that I could smell a miscalculated balance sheet from a mile away. I had tried to bury that part of myself, to soften those sharp edges, but it seemed some instincts were too deeply embedded to ever truly disappear. I told myself I was being overly suspicious, perhaps a bit paranoid in my old age. Leo was a good boy. He loved his grandmother. He wouldn't be careless with my money, surely. He was just busy, a young man with his own life, probably didn't have time to fuss over such a tiny amount. And yet, the explanation felt thin, like a poorly patched hole in a sturdy old coat. I folded the bank statement and put it away in my drawer, but the small, nagging doubt remained, a tiny seed planted in the otherwise orderly garden of my mind. That night, I found it difficult to sleep. The numbers, the vague descriptions, Leo's quick dismissal, all swirled in my thoughts. It was a familiar sensation, this analytical restlessness, one I hadn't experienced in years. It reminded me of nights spent poring over market reports, searching for patterns, for the subtle indicators that others might miss. I had thought that chapter of my life was closed, locked away with my old business suits and leather-bound ledgers. But perhaps, I mused, as I stared at the ceiling. Some doors are never truly locked, merely left ajar, waiting for the right key or the right jolt to swing them open once more. This small, insignificant charge, I sensed, might just be that jolt. The weeks turned into months, and life continued its gentle rhythm, punctuated by Leo's regular visits. He'd pop in, ostensibly to check on me, always charming, always ready with a story about his studies or his part-time job. And with almost predictable regularity, those little unexplained charges continued to appear on my bank statements. They were never large, always small enough to seem insignificant on their own. 50 haish here for a subscription renewal, 70 there for an online service fee, occasionally 100 for a digital purchase. Each time, I'd mention it to Leo, a knot of unease tightening in my stomach. His excuses became a familiar refrain, a rotating cast of plausible, yet ultimately unsatisfying explanations. One month, it was, "Oh, Vo, that must have been that antivirus software I installed for you. The free trial probably expired and it renewed automatically." Another time, when I questioned a charge for an online gaming platform I'd never even heard of, he'd laughed it off, saying, "Whoops, I think I might have used your card details by mistake when I was buying something for myself online. Via, they must have been saved from when I helped you with that other purchase. So sorry. I'll transfer it back to you, promise." But the promised transfers rarely, if ever, materialized, or if they did, they were for smaller amounts, or much later, when I'd almost forgotten. There were other instances too, not just direct debits. Sometimes, he'd arrive looking a little flustered, talking about an unexpected bill, a problem with his old car needing urgent repair, or a textbook that was suddenly vital for his course and cost a small fortune. He'd sigh, run a hand through his hair, and say something like, "I don't know how I'm going to manage this month, Vo." And my heart, conditioned by years of maternal and grandmotherly instinct, would soften. I'd offer to help, 100 or two, whatever I could spare from my pension. He'd protest, but not too vehemently, then accept with profuse thanks and promises of paying me back as soon as things settled down for him. The pattern was subtle, insidious. Each request, each unexplained charge, was small enough in isolation to be dismissed, to be attributed to my own supposed forgetfulness or his youthful carelessness. But the cumulative effect was becoming undeniable. My carefully managed savings, the modest nest egg Arthur and I had built, was slowly, almost imperceptibly, dwindling at a rate that made me deeply uncomfortable. I started keeping a small, discreet notebook, hidden in my sewing box, where I jotted down the dates and amounts of these little helps and unexplained debits. I told myself it was just to keep track, for my own records, nothing more. But even as I wrote, I knew it was a lie. It was a ledger of my growing suspicion. I tried to rationalize it. Young people today, they live differently. Their expenses are higher, their grasp on financial responsibility perhaps a little looser. Leo was a good boy at heart, I kept telling myself. He was just struggling a bit, navigating the pressures of modern life. He wouldn't deliberately take advantage of his old grandmother. The thought itself felt like a betrayal of the love I had for him, for all my family. And yet, the entries in my little notebook grew, a silent testament to a truth I was increasingly afraid to confront. The strain of it began to wear on me. I found myself becoming more withdrawn, more hesitant to answer Leo's calls immediately, a subtle shift in our interactions that he, in his self-absorption, seemed not to notice. The joy I once felt in his visits was now tinged with an undercurrent of anxiety, a premonition that each arrival might bring a new request, a new drain on my resources. I started making excuses to avoid his offers to help with anything financial, saying I'd rather go to the bank myself, that I needed the walk. He'd just shrug, probably thinking it was just my old-fashioned ways reasserting themselves. This creeping unease, this constant, low-level anxiety, was exhausting. It was like living with a leaky tap, each drip a small erosion of my peace of mind and my savings. I felt trapped between my love for my grandson and the cold, hard evidence accumulating in my secret ledger. The facade of the slightly befuddled, sweet old grandmother was becoming harder to maintain when, internally, the sharp, analytical mind I had tried to quiet for so long was screaming that something was fundamentally, terribly wrong. The foundation of trust, once so solid, was showing undeniable cracks. The breaking point, when it came, wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a major financial catastrophe. It arrived quietly, insidiously, carried on the digital airwaves of the very technology Leo had so eagerly introduced into my life. It was a Tuesday afternoon, I remember, the kind of gray, listless day that mirrors a troubled mind. I was in my small living room, trying to lose myself in a book, but my thoughts kept drifting back to my dwindling savings and the entries in my hidden notebook. My smartphone, the one Leo had insisted was essential, lay on the side table beside my teacup. Suddenly, it buzzed with an incoming text message. I rarely received texts. Most of my friends preferred a proper phone call, and my family, when they did communicate digitally, usually used those instant messaging apps. I picked up the phone, adjusting my glasses, expecting perhaps a reminder for a doctor's appointment or a promotional message from a local shop. The screen lit up, displaying a preview of the message. My heart gave a strange, sudden lurch. The sender was listed simply as Leo, but the message itself, clearly visible even before I opened it fully, was not meant for me. It read, Konski os 200 de via HJ. FDS rendu. Bora gastar com agata, amor. My breath caught in my throat. I read it again, then a third time, the casual cruelty of the words, the dismissive, derogatory term vea, old hag, hitting me with the force of a physical blow. 200. That was the exact amount I had given him that very morning, after he'd come over with a sad story about needing money for a crucial software subscription for his university course, a subscription he claimed was essential for his final project. I had hesitated, my savings were lower than ever, but his plea had been so earnest, his gratitude so seemingly profound when I'd reluctantly handed over the notes. The room seemed to tilt. The words on the screen swam before my eyes. FDS rendu, the weekend paid off. Bora gastar com agata, amor. Let's spend it with the babe, love. This wasn't just carelessness, or a young man struggling. This was calculated deception. This was contempt. The gata, the amor, it was so obviously a message meant for a girlfriend, a boast about his successful con. He had likely sent it to me by mistake, a careless tap on the wrong contact in his phone, a moment of hubris leading to an unintended confession. My teacup, forgotten in my trembling hand, clattered against the saucer, the sound unnaturally loud in the sudden, ringing silence of my apartment. I felt a coldness spread through me, starting in my chest and radiating outwards to my fingertips. All those little charges, all those emergencies, all his patient help with my banking, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. It wasn't just about the money, though that was bad enough. It was the callousness, the utter lack of respect, the way he played on my love and my trust, seeing me not as his grandmother, but as a vea, an easy mark, a source of funds for his leisure. I sank back into my armchair, the phone slipping from my numb fingers onto the carpet. The carefully constructed image I held of my grandson, the loving, helpful boy, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. What lay beneath was something ugly, something I didn't want to recognize, but could no longer deny. All the small doubts, the dismissed anxieties, the rationalizations, they were swept away by this single, brutal wave of truth. He wasn't just careless. He was cruel. He wasn't just struggling, he was exploiting. For a long while I just sat there, staring blankly at the wall, the hurtful words echoing in my mind. The pain was a sharp, physical ache, a deep, rending sorrow that went far beyond the loss of money. It was the death of an illusion, the realization that the affection I had poured out so freely had been met with such cynical disdain. The quiet life I had cultivated, the peace I thought I had found, felt like a sham, a carefully tended garden suddenly overrun by poisonous weeds. And in that moment, amidst the wreckage of my trust, something else began to stir. A slow, burning anger. A cold, hard resolve. He had called me a vea. He thought I was a fool. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. The game was over. Or rather, it was just beginning, but now, I would be setting the rules. The initial shock of Leo's carelessly sent text message gave way to a maelstrom of emotions. Grief, certainly, for the grandson I thought I knew, for the love I now realized was unreciprocated, at least in the pure way I had offered it. But beneath the grief, a different feeling began to surface, something I hadn't felt with such intensity for many, many years, a cold, clear anger. It wasn't a hot, impulsive rage, but a focused, steely resolve. The Vaya he so casually dismissed was not going to sit idly by and be plundered. My first instinct, the one born of years of grandmotherly habit, was to confront him, to demand an explanation, to perhaps even hear an apology, however insincere. But the Agnes who had managed complex financial portfolios, who had navigated treacherous business deals, knew better. A direct confrontation now, while I was still reeling and he was likely unaware of his blunder, would be foolish. He would deny, he would lie, he would try to manipulate his way out of it, perhaps even turn the tables and make me feel guilty for snooping or misunderstanding. No, this required a different approach. This required strategy. I picked up the phone from the carpet. My hand was steadier now. I looked at the offending message again, not with pain this time, but with a detached, analytical gaze. It was evidence. Crude, yes, but damning. I took a screenshot, a skill Leo himself had taught me, ironically enough. Then, I forced myself to think. What did I need? I needed more than just this one text. I needed to understand the full extent of his deception, the how and the how much. And for that, I needed help, but not from Leo, and not from anyone else in the immediate family who might, consciously or unconsciously, try to protect him or downplay his actions. My mind, surprisingly clear amidst the emotional turmoil, sifted through memories, through names from a past I had deliberately kept separate from my current life. And then, a name surfaced, Beatrice Alencar, BIA. My old friend and colleague, a razor-sharp forensic accountant before her retirement. We hadn't spoken in a couple of years, life had a way of pulling old connections apart, but I knew if anyone could help me navigate this digital mess and uncover the truth, it was BIA. She lived in another city now, but distance, in the age of technology, was no longer the barrier it once was. With a newfound determination, I found her number in my old address book, its pages brittle with age. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed, not from weakness, but from a mixture of trepidation and a burgeoning sense of purpose. What if she didn't remember me clearly? What if she wasn't interested in an old woman's family troubles? But when BIA's familiar, no-nonsense voice answered on the third ring, a wave of relief washed over me. After the initial pleasantries, the catching up on years gone by, I took a deep breath. BIA, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I need your help. I think my grandson has been stealing from me. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line, then BIA, in her characteristic direct manner, said, "Tell me everything, Agnes." And I did. I recounted the story of Leo's helpfulness, the online banking, the small, persistent charges, and finally, the damning text message. I spoke for a long time, the words pouring out, a release of all the pent-up anxiety and suspicion I had been carrying. BIA listened patiently, interrupting only to ask a clarifying question, her mind clearly already at work, piecing together the puzzle. When I finished, there was another brief pause. Then BIA said, with a conviction that warmed my bruised heart, "Right, Agnes? The little rat. We'll get him. First things first, don't say a word to him. Not a peep. We need to gather our ammunition before we fire any shots." She then started outlining a plan, a series of steps we could take to investigate, to secure my accounts, to understand the full scope of what Leo had done. Hearing her calm, professional voice, her methodical approach, was like a balm to my raw nerves. It was the reawakening of a part of me I thought had been laid to rest, the part that knew how to fight, how to protect what was mine. The Vea was sharpening her claws, and she had just found her first and most formidable ally. With BIA as my remote general, a new, clandestine routine began to take shape in my quiet apartment. Our first order of business, she insisted, was for me to truly understand my own online banking, not just the superficial tour Leo had given me, but the intricate details of statements, transfer histories, and security settings. It felt daunting at first. The tablet Leo had gifted me, a rather expensive model, I now noted with a pang of suspicion, became my primary tool. BIA, through patient video calls and clear, step-by-step emails, guided me through the labyrinthine menus and AB count options. To my own surprise, and admittedly BIA's as well, the old skills came flooding back. The interface was different, of course, from the green screen terminals and paper ledgers of my past, but the underlying principles of tracking money, of scrutinizing transactions, were timeless. Numbers, once my daily companions, still made a peculiar kind of sense to me. My fingers, initially clumsy on the touchscreen, became more adept. I learned to download detailed statements, to filter transactions by date and type, to look for patterns that Leo, in his youthful arrogance, probably assumed I would never be capable of discerning. BIA taught me how to check login histories, IP addresses, though that was a bit more technical than I could fully grasp. I understood the concept and, crucially, how to identify recurring payments and transfers. We started with the most recent months and worked our way backwards. It was a slow, meticulous process, often frustrating, as we navigated unfamiliar interfaces and bank jargon. Some evenings, after hours spent staring at the screen, my eyes would burn and my head would ache, but the drive to uncover the truth, fueled by BIA's unwavering support, kept me going. The discovery started small, confirming what my little notebook already suggested. Those vague Servisu digital charges. They weren't bank fees. Tracking them through the transaction details, we found they often originated from online stores specializing in youth fashion, electronics, and sometimes, even food delivery services to addresses that were definitely not mine. The amounts were, as I'd noticed, individually small, but collectively, they painted a picture of consistent, almost daily pilfering. Leo had been using my account as his personal piggy bank, a source of pocket money for his whims. Then we found the recurring transfers. These were more alarming. Small, regular amounts, always on the same day of the month, being sent to an account number I didn't recognize. BIA, with her professional savvy, knew how to look up account holder details, or at least infer them from certain transaction codes. The recipient account, we soon suspected, was not in Leo's name directly, but the pattern was too consistent, too aligned with his other activities, to be a coincidence. Each discovery was like another twist of the knife, but it also hardened my resolve. This wasn't just a few careless mistakes, this was a systematic siphoning of my funds. BIA was a rock through it all. She'd listen to my frustrated sighs, offer words of encouragement, and celebrate each small breakthrough with a grim satisfaction. She'd say, "You're doing brilliantly, Agnes." He never saw this coming. He thought he was dealing with a dottery old woman, but he was dealing with a sleeping lioness. Her words, though perhaps a little dramatic, bolstered my spirits. I was no longer just a victim, I was an investigator, reclaiming control one transaction at a time. The most chilling realization came when we started to add it all up. The small purchases, the unexplained service fees, the recurring transfers. Over the past year or so, since Leo had helped me set up my online banking, the total sum was far more significant than I had initially dared to imagine. It was a substantial portion of the savings I had earmarked for any future health emergencies or even just for a little comfort in my final years. Seeing that figure, stark and undeniable on the spreadsheet BIA had helped me create, didn't make me want to weep. It made my blood boil with a cold, righteous fury. He hadn't just stolen my money, he had stolen my peace of mind, my security, and a future I had carefully planned. And he had done it all with a smile and a "don't worry, Vo." Armed with a growing dossier of suspicious transactions and BIA's invaluable guidance, I knew I couldn't just sit on this information. While BIA advised against a full-blown confrontation with Leo yet, we were still gathering the bigger picture. She agreed that a carefully managed, almost casual inquiry might yield some interesting reactions, or at least confirm his pattern of deceit. The opportunity presented itself a few days later, when Leo dropped by, ostensibly to see how I was doing, but I suspected, with my newfound cynicism, that he was probably checking if the well was still providing. He was his usual charming self, inquiring about my health, my garden, complimenting the store-bought, this time, as I hadn't felt much like baking, biscuits I offered. I let the conversation flow naturally for a while, observing him, trying to reconcile the smiling young man before me with the calculating thief I now knew him to be. It was a strange, disorienting experience, like watching a play where you know the actor's true, villainous nature, but he's still performing the role of the hero. Then, choosing my moment, I adopted my most innocent, slightly puzzled expression. "Leo, dear," I began, my voice carefully pitched to sound like my usual, slightly befuddled self. "Something rather odd appeared on my bank statement this month. A charge for some very expensive headphones, the kind you young people use. I certainly didn't buy them. Do you have any idea what that could be?" I watched his face closely, every flicker of his eyes, every subtle shift in his posture. For a split second, just a heartbeat, I thought I saw a flicker of something, surprise, alarm, in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a look of mild, helpful concern. He chuckled, a practiced, easy sound. "Headphones, Vo? Gosh, no, I wouldn't know anything about that. Are you sure you didn't click on one of those pop-up ads by mistake? They're very sneaky, you know. Sometimes you buy things without even realizing it. Or maybe," he added, his brow furrowing thoughtfully, "your card details were compromised online. It happens all the time, unfortunately. You really do have to be so careful with these things." His denial was smooth, utterly convincing if I hadn't already known the truth. He even offered to take a look at my computer, to run a virus scan, to check my online accounts for any suspicious activity. The sheer audacity of it almost took my breath away. He was offering to investigate the very crimes he himself was committing, all while maintaining that air of solicitous, tech-savvy grandson. He was good, I had to admit, very good at this charade. I played along, feigning relief at his offer. "Oh, would you, dear? That would be such a help. I'm so hopeless with all this." I even let him tinker with my computer for a few minutes, watching as he clicked around, pretending to search for non-existent threats. He then pronounced, with an air of authority, that he couldn't see anything immediately obvious, but that I should change my passwords, just in case, and that he'd help me do that next time. He was, in essence, offering to further secure his own access to my accounts. When he left, an hour or so later, I felt a cold knot in my stomach. His performance had been flawless. There was no guilt, no hesitation, just a continued, confident portrayal of the helpful, concerned grandson. If I hadn't seen that text message, if BIA hadn't helped me uncover the trail of transactions, I might have even believed him. I might have doubted my own senses, my own memory. This confronto velado, this veiled inquiry, hadn't yielded a confession, but it had confirmed something far more chilling, the depth of his duplicity and his apparent lack of conscience. There would be no easy path to the truth with him. He was a consummate liar, and he clearly thought I was too foolish, too via, to ever see through his act. That underestimation, I vowed silently, would be his undoing. Leo's masterful performance of innocence only fueled my determination and BIA's. We redoubled our efforts, diving deeper into the digital breadcrumbs he'd so carelessly left behind, assuming I'd never have the wit or the means to follow them. The expensive headphones were just one purchase among many. As we scrutinized the delivery addresses linked to the various online orders, clothes, gadgets, even high-end cosmetics I would never use, a clear pattern emerged. Many items were being shipped to an apartment in a trendy part of town, an address I didn't recognize as Leo's or any of his parents' known residences. BIA, with her investigative instincts honed by years of untangling complex financial deceptions, suggested we look into the recurring transfers more closely. That unknown account number, the one receiving small but regular payments from my bank, became our new focus. She had resources, old contacts, ways of discreetly finding out information that I, even in my prime, wouldn't have known how to access. It took a few days, a period of anxious waiting on my part, but then BIA called, her voice tight with a grim sort of triumph. The account, she informed me, belonged to a young woman named Jessica Medeiros. A quick search on social media, another skill BIA had patiently taught me, though I still found those platforms bewildering, brought up Jessica's public profile. And there, in brightly lit photographs, was Leo, arm in arm with a striking young woman, both of them beaming, often showcasing new clothes, dining in fashionable restaurants, or posing with the latest gadgets. The headphones I'd questioned Leo about were prominently featured in one selfie of him with Jessica. Their online presence painted a picture of a carefree, stylish young couple, enjoying a lifestyle that seemed far beyond the means of a university student with a part-time job. It was all there, a glossy, digital testament to their shared enjoyment of my stolen money. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just Leo acting alone, impulsively siphoning off a bit of cash here and there. This was a sustained effort, quite possibly a joint enterprise with his girlfriend, to fund their aspirational lifestyle at my expense. The small, regular transfers to Jessica's account were likely his way of contributing to their shared expenses, or perhaps just funding her own desires. The gata from the infamous text message now had a face and a name. The scope of it, the premeditated nature of the deception, was far worse than I had initially allowed myself to believe. He hadn't just stumbled into this, he had built a system, a pipeline from my savings to his and Jessica's pleasures. He had involved another person in his deceit, someone who was, at best, willingly ignorant, and at worst, an active participant in the exploitation of his own grandmother. The pain of this wider conspiracy was acute, a fresh layer of betrayal on an already deep wound. I remembered all the times Leo had spoken of financial struggles, of needing money for essentials. It had all been a lie, a carefully crafted narrative designed to elicit my sympathy and open my purse. While I was cutting back on my own small comforts, worrying about making my pension last, he and Jessica were apparently living it up, funded by my life savings, by the money Arthur and I had worked so hard to accumulate. The injustice of it was staggering. BIA, ever practical, immediately started documenting everything, screenshots of Jessica's social media posts that corroborated the purchases, the dates, the connections. We were building a case, piece by painstaking piece. The image of the slightly confused grandmother was now a distant memory. In its place was a woman meticulously gathering evidence, driven by a cold anger and an unshakable resolve to expose the truth, no matter how ugly or how painful it might be. Leo had no idea the storm that was gathering, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that when it finally broke, it would sweep away all his lies. The weight of these discoveries, the sheer, calculated coldness of Leo's deception, would have been unbearable had I been truly alone. But I wasn't. Beatrice Alencar, my old friend, my comrade in arms from a different lifetime, was my steadfast anchor. Her voice on the phone, always calm, always pragmatic, was a constant source of strength. She never let me wallow in self-pity or doubt. Instead, she channeled my anger and hurt into focused action. Every piece of evidence we uncovered, every lie we exposed, she treated with the professional detachment of a seasoned investigator, yet always with an undercurrent of fierce loyalty to me. She'd say, "We're building an airtight case, Agnes. He won't know what hit him." Her confidence was infectious. Beyond BIA's invaluable remote support, I realized I needed an ally on the ground, someone within the banking system itself. The idea of walking into my local branch and trying to explain this convoluted mess to a random teller filled me with dread. I needed to speak to someone in authority, someone who would listen, truly listen, and take me seriously. I remembered Mr. Carvalho, the branch manager. He was a younger man, perhaps in his early 40s, always impeccably dressed, with a serious but approachable demeanor. I had interacted with him a few times over the years, mostly for routine matters, but he had always struck me as competent and fair. Gathering my courage, and a meticulously organized folder of printouts and notes prepared with BIA's help, I made an appointment to see him. Walking into his office, I felt a tremor of anxiety, the old Agnes, the one who felt out of her depth, trying to reassert herself. But I pushed her down. I sat opposite Mr. Carvalho, took a deep breath, and began to lay out my story, from Leo's initial help with the online banking to the damning text message and the trail of suspicious transactions we had since uncovered. To my surprise, I spoke with a clarity and precision that I hadn't realized I still possessed. The years I had spent analyzing financial data, presenting findings, arguing points, those skills hadn't entirely vanished, they had merely been dormant. I showed him the printouts of the online purchases, the transfers to Jessica Medeiros' account, the screenshots of their social media posts, flaunting items that corresponded with dates and amounts debited from my account. I even showed him the infamous text message from Leo. Mr. Carvalho listened intently, his expression growing increasingly grave as I spoke. He didn't interrupt, except to ask a pertinent question or to clarify a detail. There was no condescension in his demeanor, no dismissal of my concerns as the ramblings of a confused old woman. He looked at the evidence, at my carefully compiled notes, and I could see a flicker of professional shock, then a growing indignation in his eyes. When I finally finished, a heavy silence filled the office. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the folder before him. "Mrs. Pereira," he said, his voice low and serious, "this is deeply disturbing. What you've shown me here points to a clear and systematic pattern of unauthorized activity." He assured me the bank would take this matter very seriously. He explained that they would initiate their own internal investigation based on the information I had provided, and he outlined the steps I could take to further secure my accounts immediately, changing all passwords, revoking any third-party access, and setting up stricter alert notifications. More importantly, he validated my experience. He didn't doubt me. He didn't try to minimize what had happened. He treated me not as a helpless victim, but as a credible individual who had uncovered a serious breach of trust and potential fraud. Leaving his office that day, I felt a profound sense of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't just fighting this battle with BIA in the digital ether, I now had a powerful institutional ally prepared to stand with me. The fortress around Leo's lies was growing stronger, and I felt more empowered than I had in years. My voice had been heard, and the system, however impersonal it might sometimes seem, was beginning to work in my favor. With Mr. Carvalho and the bank now actively involved, and BIA continuing to provide unwavering support, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place with alarming speed. The bank's internal investigation corroborated everything we had found, and even uncovered a few more tendrils of Leo's deceit, small cash withdrawals from ATMs in locations I never frequented, cleverly disguised under seemingly innocuous merchant codes. The dossier of evidence was now irrefutable, a cold, hard testament to my grandson's calculated betrayal. The time for quiet investigation was over. The moment for confrontation had arrived. I decided it needed to be done on my terms, in my home, a place where I felt strongest. I called my son, David, Leo's father, and his wife, Clara, my daughter-in-law. I told them I needed to discuss a serious family matter and asked them to come over on Saturday morning and to bring Leo with them. There was a puzzled tone in David's voice, but he agreed. I also arranged for BIA to be present via video call, projected onto my living room television screen. Her sharp intellect and moral support, even from afar, would be invaluable. Mr. Carvalho had also prepared a summarized report from the bank, which he had couriered to me, a formal document outlining the extent of the unauthorized transactions. Saturday morning arrived, heavy with unspoken tension. When David, Clara, and Leo walked in, I could see the apprehension on my son and daughter-in-law's faces. Leo, however, sauntered in with his usual air of nonchalance, perhaps assuming this was just another family gathering where he might be gently chided for some minor youthful transgression. He even had the gall to ask, "What's up, Vo? You look serious. Is everything okay?" His feigned concern was almost laughable, given what I knew. I gestured for them to sit, my heart pounding a steady, determined rhythm against my ribs. BIA's face appeared on the television screen, her expression calm but resolute. I began, my voice surprisingly firm, devoid of the tremor I had feared. I started by reminding them of Leo's helpfulness in setting up my online banking, his constant assurances that he was looking out for me. Then, with a deliberate slowness, I started to lay out the evidence. I presented the bank statements, the printouts of the online purchases, the delivery addresses, the transfers to Jessica Medeiros. I showed them the photographs from social media, Leo and Jessica flaunting their ill-gotten gains. And then, I recounted the wrong number text message, reading out his cruel words, "Konski os 200 Divia HJ." As the evidence mounted, the atmosphere in the room grew thick with disbelief and a dawning horror, especially on the faces of David and Clara. Leo's initial confident smirk faltered, replaced by a pasty pallor. He tried to interrupt, to deny, to bluster, but I held up a hand, my gaze unwavering. "I am not finished, Leonardo," I said, using his full name for emphasis. Then I delivered the final, most unexpected blow. I looked directly at him, at my son, at my daughter-in-law, and I told them about my past. I said, "You all see me as the grandmother who bakes cakes and struggles with her phone. But for over 20 years, before most of you were even born, or when you, Leo, were just a child, I managed multi-million real investment portfolios. I understand numbers. I understand systems. And I understand deception. You thought you were fooling a naive old woman. You were profoundly mistaken." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Clara's sharp intake of breath. David stared at me, then at Leo, his face a mask of stunned disbelief and growing fury. Leo himself seemed to shrink in his chair, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped animal. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There were no more smooth denials, no more easy lies. The weight of the evidence, coupled with the revelation of my hidden past, had shattered his composure. BIA, from the screen, interjected calmly, outlining some of the more technical aspects of the fraud, the ways Leo had manipulated the online systems, her words precise and damning. Then, I placed Mr. Carvalho's official bank report on the coffee table. It was a stark summary of their findings, confirming every accusation. David finally found his voice, a low growl of fury directed at his son. "How could you? How could you do this to your own grandmother?" Clara was weeping silently, her face buried in her hands. Leo, cornered and exposed, finally mumbled something about Jessica, about being under pressure, a pathetic attempt to deflect blame. But it was too late. The truth, in all its ugly detail, was out. The Vea had not only seen through his cruel deception, she had meticulously and with a competence he never imagined, brought his entire house of cards crashing down. The aftermath of the confrontation was as messy and painful as the revelations themselves. Leo, stripped of his bravado, finally crumbled, offering a string of incoherent apologies and increasingly desperate excuses. He blamed Jessica's influence, the pressures of student life, anything but his own calculated greed and disrespect. David, my son, was a tempest of fury and profound disappointment. I had never seen him so angry, not even in his most rebellious teenage years. He confronted Leo with a raw honesty that left no room for further evasion, demanding to know not just how, but why he could betray a grandmother who had shown him nothing but kindness and support. Clara, my daughter-in-law, oscillated between heartbroken sobs and sharp, incisive questions directed at her son. The illusion of their perfect, helpful child had been irrevocably shattered, and the shame and sorrow were etched on their faces. For them, it was not just about the stolen money, it was about the fundamental breach of family trust, the chilling realization of their son's capacity for such cold-hearted deceit. They looked at me, their eyes filled with a mixture of apology and a dawning, almost fearful, respect for this woman they thought they knew, but clearly hadn't understood at all. In the days that followed, the immediate consequences for Leo began to unfold. David and Clara, after long, agonizing discussions, decided that he needed to face tangible repercussions. They insisted he start repaying every cent he had stolen, even if it meant taking on extra jobs and living with extreme frugality for the foreseeable future. His relationship with Jessica, unsurprisingly, imploded under the weight of the revelations and the sudden cutoff of their illicit income stream. The life of carefree leisure, funded by my savings, was over. More painfully for him, perhaps, was the profound loss of his parents' trust and respect, a chasm that would take years, if ever, to bridge. As for me, the storm of the confrontation gave way to a strange, quiet calm. The anger, though still present, was no longer a consuming fire but a controlled ember. I had done what I needed to do. I had reclaimed not just my financial autonomy but, more importantly, my dignity. The process of unmasking Leo had also, unexpectedly, unmasked a part of myself I had kept hidden for too long. The sharp, analytical Agnes, the woman of finance and strategy, was no longer a ghost of the past but a very present part of who I was. And I found, to my surprise, that I liked her. My relationship with David and Clara entered a new, more honest phase. They were deeply apologetic for Leo's actions, for their own unwitting blindness. There was a new level of respect in their interactions with me, a recognition of a strength and capability they hadn't perceived before. We began to talk more openly, not just about the fallout from Leo's actions, but about my past, about the life I had led before I became simply Vo. It was as if a veil had been lifted, allowing for a more authentic connection. The most significant transformation, however, was within myself. I no longer felt the need to play the part of the slightly befuddled, dependent elderly woman. I embraced my rediscovered acuity. With BIA's continued encouragement, I started to think about how I could use my old skills not just for self-protection, but for something more. The idea began to form, tentative at first, then with growing clarity. Perhaps I could help other seniors navigate the often confusing world of online finance, to empower them to protect themselves from the kind of exploitation I had experienced. The thought of transforming my painful experience into something constructive, something that could benefit others, brought a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The Vea was not just reclaiming her past, she was actively shaping a new, more meaningful future. Months have passed since that tumultuous Saturday morning, months that have seen a quiet but profound shift in the landscape of my life. My apartment, once a silent witness to my growing unease and eventual outrage, now feels like a true haven again, a place of peace and self-assuredness. The balcony garden thrives under my care, its blooms more vibrant than ever, reflecting, perhaps, the renewed vitality I feel within myself. The sharp edges of the betrayal have softened, not forgotten, but no longer defining my days. Leo is slowly, painstakingly attempting to make amends. He works 2 part-time jobs now, and a small, regular sum appears in my bank account each month, a repayment schedule his parents rigorously enforce. Our interactions are infrequent, formal, and tinged with the sadness for what was lost. The easy affection is gone, replaced by his quiet deference and my polite but distant acknowledgement. Whether he will ever truly understand the depth of the hurt he caused, or genuinely change, only time will tell. For now, he is learning the hard lesson of consequences. My relationship with David and Clara has found a new equilibrium, built on a foundation of newfound honesty and mutual respect. They visit regularly, not out of obligation, but seemingly out of a genuine desire to connect with the woman they are only now beginning to truly know. We talk about my past life in finance, about the challenges I faced, the successes I achieved. It's as if a missing piece of their understanding of me has been restored, enriching our bond. They, too, are healing, grappling with the disappointment in their son, but also finding a new strength in their own relationship and in our reconfigured family dynamic. The idea that sparked in the aftermath of the confrontation has taken root and begun to blossom. Encouraged by BIA, and with the surprising support of Mr. Carvalho from the bank, I've started volunteering at a local community center. Twice a month, I give informal talks, not lectures, but conversations, with other seniors about online banking safety, how to spot potential scams, and the importance of understanding their own finances in this digital age. I share some of my own, heavily anonymized, experiences, not to dwell on the negative, but to illustrate the very real risks and the power of being informed. It's astonishingly rewarding. To see the flicker of understanding in someone's eyes, to answer their tentative questions, to feel their relief when they realize they are not alone in their confusion or fears, it has given me a sense of purpose that I thought was long behind me. The Agnes Pereira, financial maven of my youth, has found a new, gentler incarnation as Agnes, the community financial guide. My old skills, once used to navigate the complexities of the market, are now employed to help others secure their own small corners of the world. BIA remains my steadfast friend and long-distance confidant. We speak often, sharing a chuckle now and then about how we rattled some cages. Her belief in me was instrumental in my own journey back to myself. And Mr. Carvalho, bless him, has even referred a few of the bank's more vulnerable elderly clients to my informal sessions at the community center, a testament to a trust built on shared experience. Life is different now. The wrong number text message, so cruel in its intent, ultimately became a catalyst for profound change, an unwelcome key that unlocked a part of me I had kept hidden for too long. It forced me to confront not only my grandson's deception but also my own self-imposed limitations. I learned that strength isn't just about a formidable past, it's about how you rise to meet the challenges of the present. I am no longer just Agnes, the quiet widow, the slightly bewildered grandmother. I am Agnes, a woman who found her voice, her strength, and a new way to contribute, proving that it's never too late to rewrite your own narrative, to turn a painful ending into a vibrant new beginning. The numbers in my bank account are slowly replenishing, but the wealth I feel now is of a different, more enduring kind, the richness of self-respect, purpose, and authentic connection. And that, I've come to realize, is the most valuable asset of all. My story had a painful chapter, but it also opened a new one, full of unexpected strength and purpose. If this journey has resonated with you, if you believe in the power of uncovering truth and reclaiming your life, perhaps you'd consider subscribing to see more stories like this one. Your own strength might be waiting just around the corner, too.